But you do have a situation in Parliament where members who are elected to constituencies are not sworn in. They don't take the oath of allegiance in the House until after a speaker and a deputy speaker are elected, until after both of them take the oath of allegiance.
Yeah.
It is one of those situations that many people have questioned, but it is in fact provided for, that this is the way it should be. And indeed, many people in suggesting change have suggested that perhaps they should be made to take the oath first and then embark upon their duty.
Yeah. But what then is the status of the member of parliament, given the fact that a speaker is not appointed or selected or elected, neither a deputy speaker, and the member of parliament is there? What then is his status, having not taken the oath of allegiance by virtue of the presiding officer carrying out that function?
It is very specifically provided for, but notwithstanding that he has not yet taken the oath of office, and that he takes it after the swearing in and after the choice of a speaker and a deputy speaker, that it is in fact proper and right. That is in fact provided for.
Yeah.
Gentlemen?
Go ahead.
I was wondering, what if Errol wasn't also getting at the point that in the event that the entire session goes through for the day or 2 days or however long it lasts, and there's no election of a speaker or deputy speaker, then the question arises, what's the status
Of the member of parliament.
I think that's what you were getting at.
Yes.
And I think that brings me to the point, thanks for having been a good mind reader. That brings us to the interpretation of section 50, subsection 1 and 2 of the Constitution, where it specifically says that you have to act with dispatch in the appointment of the speaker. So the fundamental question which arises by necessary implication is that a government having been appointed by the present holder of the office of Prime Minister, whether he has acted reasonably in having Parliament meet on Friday and not before. I think this is implicit in your incisive question. What do we then do, as Mr. George has hinted? What if nothing happens, no speaker is elected on the first day? What if no speaker is elected on the second day? What are we as a country, what are we going to do as a people? You know?
Okay, we have two callers, Cascade Carney. Good evening, Cascade. Welcome.
Mr. Panel,
Yes.
my simple question is, as a very concerned citizen, if Mr. Pandey, with all respect, is not the leader of the opposition, what would be him doing in Parliament? What sense he would be in Parliament on Friday? This is my question to you, panel.
No.
Could you repeat the question, caller?
If Mr. Pandey, up to now so far, is not the leader of the opposition, what would be his position in Parliament? What position he would be in Parliament on Friday?
Member of Parliament, yes.
He remains a member for Couva,
North.
Couva North.
Yes.
Okay, we have the other caller from Carney. Welcome. Good evening. Carney.
Gentlemen, I have two short questions. Number one is that if the speakers that are put up, people that are put up for speakers, will all of them be in Parliament? Because I heard they have about thousands of them. So I would like to know if these people will be in Parliament. That's the first question. And number two, if a speaker is not elected, will the MPs get paid? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
What happens in the case of the election if you're going to bring 1,000 people for nomination in Parliament? Do they have to be bodily present, physically present? or you just submit a name?
The learning and the law on the relevant on that issue is that it is open to any member of parliament to propose either a member of the House who is not a minister or parliamentary secretary, or a member of a chamber, and there is no limit on the number of people that could be proposed. In fact, in proposing someone, the learning is that one should have the approval beforehand of the person to be proposed, that he is prepared, if elected, to be the speaker. Right? And once that is present, that requirement is present, one could, of course, go ahead and propose someone. And the law does not limit the number of people that could be proposed.
Subject, of course, to the limitation of Section 48.
Well, they have, of course, to qualify as
They have
citizens
to be qualified
and
citizens.
be over a certain age. Indeed.
But to get directly to the question that was asked, I think it appears to be a practical reality in that if it is you are proposing someone to the office of Speaker, then that person should be there, because it appears that no other business can proceed unless you have the election of the Speaker and then the election of the Deputy Speaker. So if that person is not present to take the chair upon being elected, then you are practically stymied in that you can't proceed with the other business unless the Deputy Speaker is also appointed. So, I mean, if one is serious about the respect for the institution of Parliament and you have 1,000 nominees, then I think you would have to demonstrate your seriousness by having your 1,000 nominees present.
But that suggests another observation. Is that being serious about the sanctity of Parliament? Does that suggest some kind of contempt for the institution? And the fact that we are seeing in our country the erosion of integrity in so many of our institutions, is that another nail in the coffin of Parliament?
Well, I think for good sense and reasonableness, that's why perhaps the first convention of the Constitution arose, that you will have agreement by the leader of the opposition. So when you know that you have concurrence on both sides, you know then that Parliament will follow very smoothly. But there, in accordance with the written law under the Constitution, there is no provision for which the present leader of the party, of the person who occupies the office of Prime Minister, whether that person has to get the consent of the leader of the other political party that commands the majority. In our case, in the other 18, the other leader.
But that is not going to happen.
Well, there is now almost conclusive evidence that it would not happen. So that as we are serious people, we should then ask the question, well, what if? And we should anticipate what is going to happen, because you are allowing the citizenry of this country to undergo a real traumatic experience that has started to happen.
We have a caller from Palmis before we go to the other question. Caller from Palmis, good evening.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Yes.
And to your panel.
Yes.
The question of Mr. Fuad's conscience and Friday voting for a speaker, I would put it the opposite way. I think this type of conscience he's talking about is a conscience that's going to be more positive on the UNC side, because 18 seats, which give an opportunity of an equal In other words, 18 seats means both parties have the same amount of power, more or less, in the sense of, as far as the electorate is concerned, and as far as 18 seats against 18 seats, none really win, none really losing. The fact is, the conscience, I think Mr. Fuad is talking about, is he's going to support the UNC solidly. That is his conscience, to show the public and the country as a whole that I am dissatisfied with 18 seats and we could not have a share in power. And I'm going to make it clear when I support my party. So this question of anticipating that you would support the PNM to have a speaker, I totally disagree with it. I'm not a psychologist to read human mind, but I'm suspecting this conscience affair is really based on the question of showing the public that you're going to support the UNC heartedly and respect the party principle and the philosophy and its leadership. And that will close the whole deal. No speaker, no parliament. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I think we still have to wait and hear and see what Dr. Khan does. We have a caller from San Juan. Welcome. Good evening. Yes?
And good night to your panel, and again, happy birthday to Mr. McLean.
Thank you.
Now, I'm just trying for your, the panel here to clarify something for me, please. The sitting starts at 1:30, and I was hearing somewhere along the line that it is due to finish or complete around 8. I don't know if the standing orders agrees with it. I'm just asking. Now, after 8 o'clock, in any case, after the proclamation is made, there is no speaker, and the clerk of the House hasn't got the power to adjourn or to do anything about the sitting of Parliament. Now, there is a suggestion that this will roll on until around the 9th of April, for whatever reason. I would like you all to explain the period between 8 p.m. on Friday night and continuing up to whatever time it is. I don't know how the standing orders deal with it, and I just want to find out exactly whether or not this can go on for days upon days upon days, as suggestions made to that same effect by one of the UNC members. Thank you.
Okay, before we get a response from the panel, let's go to Paul Spain and hear what Paul Spain has to say. Welcome to the issue.
Good night, sir.
Yes?
Good night.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, I would like to find out what time does the current speaker term ends, Mr. Griffith? Is it when another speaker is elected? And if that is the case, if another speaker is not elected, what happens? The other point is, if it is that Parliament is called on Friday, and there is no resolution, that is, an election of a speaker, would it not mean that part of the Constitution was satisfied in that Parliament was called, and the current government can sit out for another 6 months again? I'd like to get some response on those.
Okay, first of all, the question of the 8 o'clock deadline, so to speak. I understand that is only possible if the speaker is elected, or the speaker is presiding.
I am not too sure that that is the factual position. I think that at this point it may be useful to express the view that everyone seems to be proceeding on the basis that if the 18 members of the PNM vote one way and the 18 members of the UNC vote another way, there can be no speaker. I think that it is necessary to examine that, because that position is not necessarily so. And I would certainly like to refer you, Mr. Moderator, and the panel, and the population to Standing Order 3 of the Standing Orders of the House of Representatives, which I think is very, very instructive. And when Prime Minister Manning appeared to say very confidently, along with the Attorney General and along with Mr. Valley, who will be the leader of the House, that a speaker will be elected, I think it behoves us to go to Standing Order 3, which would suggest that a speaker would be elected. So that I think that there's a lot of speculation which may not come to pass at all. And I will just read for you Standing Order 3.3, and it states, first of all, 1 and 2 deal with the question of the election of the speaker and if there being just one person put forward, which quite clearly will not be the position on Friday. And then it goes to 3. If another such member or person willing to serve if elected be proposed and seconded, the clerk shall propose the question that the member who was first proposed should be the speaker. I said this a while ago. If that proposal be agreed to, the member or other person so chosen shall be speaker. But if the proposal be negatived, and that is what I'm asking you to concentrate on, but if the proposal be negatived, the clerk shall propose a like question in respect of any other such member or person who has been proposed and seconded until the question is carried in favor of one of the members or other persons so proposed. I want to suggest to you that there are many people who do not understand the meaning of the word negative. And negative does not mean that if you have an 18-18 situation, the situation is negative. It is negative insofar as you have more people voting against the proposal as for. In other words, there are those who may argue, and I think perhaps quite successfully, that if a member rises in his place and proposes someone as speaker, and that is duly seconded, and then somebody else is nominated, is proposed and seconded, and then they put the person who was first proposed, the question on that person, and you get an 18-18 situation on the interpretation of 3.3. With an 18-18 situation, it is suggested that such a person, although he got only 18 votes and not 19, would indeed be the elected speaker.
Because he was not negative.
It was not negative.
I disagree.
Well, you may.
Yes.
All I'm saying is that I am pointing to you, I'm pointing out to you and indeed to the country, what is stated in the standing orders about the proposal being, it must be negative for the person not to be elected.
Yes, but it still does
and
not
negative
resolve.
means a majority in saying nay.
More against
saying
than
nay.
saying yes.
It still does not resolve the primary situation of the 18-18 having 18 on one side, 18 on the other. In terms of votes, it still does not say that that person, upon my interpretation of it, that person shall be the speaker.
But
Meaning it's mandatory for that person to become and remain the speaker.
But does this not suggest to you that the 18 positives would become weightier than the 18 negatives?
No, it is not conclusive.
I mean, according to what the standing order says.
It is not conclusive because the language there is not conclusive.
Mr. George, what is your take on this?
Well, this is a point I had looked at since the last time when I was on the program, and I mentioned it then. But it appears that while I take Hector's point fully, I think there might be room for further argument, because if one is to take the interpretation of negative, then it means we must also look higher up and look at the interpretation that must be given to the phrase be agreed to. It says, if that proposal be agreed to, the member or other person so chosen shall be speaker. Now, what do we mean when we say be agreed to? Could it simply mean that one person, if one member out of a 36-seat parliament agrees, then that person remains as speaker in the absence of the negative in? So the thing is, the agreed may actually carry the very same meaning that the negative carries, in the sense that the agreed appears to me is open to an interpretation that that agreement must be agreement by the House, which in that sense would be agreement by a majority of the House.
And furthermore, you must then turn to the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301, and you will see that the different canons of interpretation, what was the intent, what is the purpose, what is the literal construction, how do they reconcile to each other, and how should the final judgment be. It's very difficult.
Gentlemen, I will simply say to you that it is well known in parliamentary practice that one talks about negative resolutions and the like. You don't have to go to the Interpretation Act for that. It is a very simple everyday practice in Parliament where one has negative resolutions. And the meaning of that, I say to you, is that you have more people voting negatively than positively. And all I'm saying to you is, I'm not arguing the issue, I am simply saying that nobody seems to be raising the issue that is set out in Standing Order 3.3. And all I'm saying is, you may disagree with me, but all I'm saying is that it states very clearly there, it states very clearly that if a proposal is negative, the person cannot be Speaker. And it also would suggest that if the proposal is not negative, the person could indeed be Speaker. And I am saying that when Prime Minister Manning and the Attorney General and the Leader of the House confidently say that they are going to Parliament, that a Speaker will be elected, that they may not get the Speaker that they want, but they may indeed get a Speaker who is nominated by the other side. It may well be that this is what is in their mind, the question of negative vote. And indeed, it would boil down to whether it will be the PNM or the UNC that would first catch the eye of the clerk of the House and put the first name proposed as Speaker. I simply say that. I'm not prepared to argue. I simply point out.
No, but that is why in law, in the written law, we have different canons of interpretation, and all written law by which the country is to be dependent on has to be interpreted in that way. And this is why you have the type of interpretation which you are saying and which I have taken another view, and I believe there might be other views, but I want to be on record as vehemently disagreeing in accordance with the written law to you,
but do you
not practice, not parliamentary practice.
Do you also disagree that it suggests a window of opportunity? It certainly does.
You are putting words in my mouth.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you.
I am trying to be objective, so I would restrain myself with humility from answering that leading question.
Okay, we have a caller from Arima, but you know we still have to deal with the question of that was asked the previous caller about the current term of the Speaker and when it ends.
Yes, if I may just answer that. The standing orders provide that the Speaker shall remain in office until such time as a new Speaker is elected. The result is that when all other members of Parliament, except people who hold ministerial office, go out of existence, when their position ends with the dissolution of the House, the Speaker and the President of the Senate remain in office until such time as the first sitting of the new session of Parliament.
I want to openly agree with Mr. Hector McLean on that.
Okay, we have two callers, Arima, Diego Martin. Arima, welcome. Good evening. Yes.
I would like to know if the voting will be secret ballot or show of hands. I didn't hear that when you replied. Could you please let me know? Thanks.
Yes. Well, it's a yay-nay situation.
And then the clerk can call for decision.
Earlier we dealt with that, and Mr. McLean pointed out that it is done as, you know, as any other business of the House.
But just to touch again on the point that Hector has raised, I am with him entirely on the question of the negative, because as I said, it's something we raised since last I was on the show. However, I think that it's an interesting argument, and other sides can be raised in that people can then ask, what do you mean when you say be agreed to? Because if negatived, I mean, I know it has special connotations, but if at the end of the day negative means that you must have more than 18, then the question arises, doesn't that also apply to agreed to? Because it's not simply that if the proposal be negative, if it's not negative, then the person automatically becomes speaker. It says, if that proposal be agreed to. You see, where you have the automatic occupation of office of speaker is where no second person is proposed. That obviously will not happen. Okay, I think Mr. Pandey has thousands lined up to propose. So therefore, once you have more than one person proposed, there's no automatic confirmation in the office. The standing orders then go on to say, if another such member or person willing to serve if elected be proposed and seconded, the clerk shall propose the question that the member who was first proposed should be speaker, if that proposal be agreed to. So all I'm saying is that it raises interesting legal questions, interesting legal arguments. One can take the view that agreed to may simply mean that one person could agree to it, but I don't think that a court of law would look at it so simplistically. You know.
Okay, we have two callers, Diego Martin, Chase Village. Diego Martin, I know you've been waiting for some time.
Hello?
Yes.
Just to go back to an earlier point made by Dr. Moonan, this gentleman who calls himself a political scientist, and the crossing of the floor, which might come into play on that day, and which Mr. McLean would have practical experience of, perhaps. He was suggesting that a judge apparently overruled part of the Constitution. I am not aware that a judge has that power. The Constitution is the supreme law. Is that correct? That that occurred to Mr. McLean? And the problem, as far as I understand it, is that simply that the standing orders have never been amended to put it into effect.
That is how I recall.
What the court held is that it was that a member of parliament can move across to any political party having been elected to the House of Representatives. And we have, to my left, we have evidence of that.
No, I don't think you have evidence of that. The facts were that this member did not move to another political party. He simply resigned from the party to which he belonged.
Well, I beg your pardon, but we have...
Quite different.
Yeah, okay, I beg your pardon, but we have evidence of that in Dr. Vincent Lass
and Dr. Griffith.
And Dr. Griffith.
Yes.
So do accept my apology.
And indeed, the position in the case of Dr. Vincent Lass and Dr. Griffith was that there is something wanting in the standing orders which have not been properly amended, and therefore one could not give effect to that which is law.
In the Crossing of the Floor Act.
In the Crossing of the Floor Act.
Okay, we have Chase Village on the line. Good evening, Chase Village. Hello, Chase Village.
Good night, gentlemen.
Yes. Yes, we're hearing you.
I have been listening to all of you, your discussion, and two issues came to my mind. Firstly, I should like to say that it has been noticed for some time when people enter into a party and after some time when they are there, they walk across the floor. They go to another party. This seems to be becoming a way where cowards who cannot really wade their through by courage and strength, but serving in the party which they elect to be, are lured by probably some gift or some reward by crossing a party line. However, the point now, we are at a crisis, and I too would very much like to see this crisis come to an end. But as I see it, the best means open now to us in this country to have a new election. Whatever be the end, I think a new election is the answer. Thank you.
Okay. Diego Martin on the line now. Welcome, Diego Martin.
Hello?
Good evening, yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing.
It seems to me that the UNC intends to make a puppet show of our parliament. Talking about 1,000 people coming there and going to be nominated for the post of speaker. I mean, he's making a whole joke of the whole thing. Could Mr. McLean tell me whether the president has any say in this at all? 1, 2. Who can the clerk of the House adjourn the House in the absence of a speaker? Please, thank you.
First of all, His Excellency the President is not in any way involved in what would happen on Friday, apart from having issued a proclamation to the summoning the Parliament and appointing a time and place for it to meet for its first session after the holding of a general election. His Excellency the President is not involved, and I don't think should be brought into it. On the question of the adjournment of the House, the standing orders say nothing about the clerk being able to adjourn, but one is to point out that there is really there is no order paper. There's nothing on the order paper. The business of the House is simply to elect a speaker, a deputy speaker, and to administer the oath of allegiance of all of the members of the House. And indeed, when those things are finished, the business of the House for the day is really ended. And I myself am clear, as the whole point is that if a speaker is not elected, it means that we would not have the several members embarking upon taking the oaths. And I myself don't think that it is any big deal in terms of the adjournment of the House. The standing orders provide, under normal circumstances, that by a certain hour the House should be adjourned, unless, of course, there's a motion to the effect that the House continue to sit. But one can't get to that stage because if a speaker is not in fact elected. But as I say, it may be that a speaker may be elected.
Using that little window of opportunity.
It may be elected, and all the fears that are being expressed may come to naught.
Okay.
Well, what it seems that the members of the UNC are relying on, from the utterances I've seen in the media, it appears that they're relying on the provision which speaks of a sit-in or a session of Parliament. And I think they're relying on that to say that, look, if no speaker is elected, then this cannot be considered a sit-in or a session. So therefore, the automatic provision as to adjournment at 8 p.m. cannot kick in. Right. But the point is, I think that is quite a nebulous argument, and it's open to debate.
Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, we're coming to the end of the program. We'll take one more caller. Point 14. Good evening. I know you. Yes, good evening.
Good evening. I'm calling from Guapo, actually, and what I have is a question
and a comment. The question is the criteria for nominating persons as likely speakers of the House, whether there's a specific criteria for that, and if you could inform us, the general public, what that criteria is. That is the question. But the comment is, having heard that Mr. Pandey has 1,000 odd people that he can afford to nominate, I'm wondering whether one can be allowed to just keep going on and on and on nominating, and some nominations may very well be frivolous. I'm saying that based on the criteria. So if you could enlighten us what the criteria is, I'll be happy.
Okay.
Section 50, subsection 3 says a person, the speaker, subsection 2, it says the speaker may be elected either from among the members of the House of Representatives who are not ministers or parliamentary secretaries, or, subject to subsection 3, from among persons who are not members of either house. And then subsection 3 goes on to say, a person who is not a member of either house shall not be elected speaker where A, he is not a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, or B, he is a person disqualified for election as a member of the House of Representatives by virtue of subsection 1 of section 48, or any law enacted in pursuance of subsection 2 of that section.
Yes.
Very well.
Well, gentlemen, in the few minutes we have, well, I guess it's about 2 or 3 minutes we have, I want to find out from you, what do you think, in a nutshell, is going to take place in Parliament on Friday? I hear from Mr. McLean that, you know, things would probably not be as dramatic as the press and some members of the public are making it out to be, and that perhaps the relevant section of the standing orders would provide the out, so to speak. Mr. McLean.
Well, it is my view. I do think that a speaker will be elected. I feel that on a proper interpretation of the standing orders, it would be possible for that to happen. With an 18-18 vote, I do not think that there would be the crossing of the floor or there would be voting of members of the UNC with the PNM, or members of the PNM with the UNC. I rather discount that. And I do think that one will call to aid Standing Order 3, and that as some people confidently expect, I'm not being confident, but as some people confidently expect, a speaker will in fact be appointed, and one will be able to get on with the business of the country.
Dr. Mulan.
It is my sincere expectation that a speaker should be elected, but there is no basis in Standing Order 3. I vehemently disagree that that can be used as authority for a speaker to be elected.
Mr. George.
Well, I wouldn't vehemently disagree. I would beg most respectfully to differ in the interpretation that Mr. McLean has proposed, in that, as I said, I'm with him entirely on the question of negative, but I think that once you get that out of the way, it then opens the Pandora's box of the question of be agreed to. And my position is further fortified if one looks at Sub-Rule 3 of Standing Order 3, which says at the end, but if the proposal be negatived, the clerk shall propose a like question in respect of any other such member or person who has been proposed and seconded until the question is carried in favor of the members or other persons so proposed. So therefore, it seems to suggest that the same meaning or weight you have to attach to negative, in that negative means more than 18, then it appears that when you speak of agreed to, it ought properly to carry the same weight. And particularly when you look at the end here where they say until the question is carried in favor.
Okay.
In other words, the purpose, what is the purpose of the standing order? I agree.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. That hour has come around very quickly this evening, and I must thank you for taking the time out to come and share some of your knowledge and questions and observations with us. We look forward to what is going to happen on Friday. I don't think that anybody can put their head on a block and say that this is going to happen or that is not going to happen. But we all wait anxiously to see how the business of the country will proceed. Of course, we want to inform you that although the press, the media are not allowed to carry the proceedings in Parliament live, we will be outside of Parliament with a live broadcast of the activities around the Red House and keeping you up to date as much as we can possibly do of what is going on within. So stay tuned to channels 2 and 13 for further programming, and of course 1:30 on Friday. So thanks for viewing and have a good night.
Freedom is the soul of Trinidad and Tobago. PPP. It's you.
There, I said that it's important that the police plays their part in the Crime Stoppers, because the community is doing its part, the media is doing its part, the business sector is doing its part. But the thing is, all of that will be in vain if the police don't do their part in terms of investigating the matters properly. We've had meetings yesterday afternoon after the launch, and some of the things we've come up with would be recommendations that we'd be making to the Commissioner of Police and to the Minister of National Security, particularly to deal with their internal procedures. What we were looking at is to speed up the process by which information from Crime Stoppers gets to the investigating officers. We were looking at procedures whereby there's a reporting system where the investigating officer must file a report back to Crime Stoppers. We're also accessing software which we'll be implementing to track the progress of these things, and we will be presenting a monthly report to the nation. So if it is that we have 100 tips coming in and only 10 or 15 investigated, then we are going to be writing to the Commissioner asking him to provide an explanation to the nation why the other 85 have not been investigated.
Because I would imagine that the police need to understand, and I'm sure they do, that the survivability of this kind of concept depends heavily on how they respond to it. Because if people realize, well, I keep calling in and nothing is done, then I'm not going to waste my time anymore.
That's right. So the thing is, we are determined to monitor it, because the thing is, I mean, while we know that the police do their job, the thing is, we're not taking any chances. We are monitoring it, we are going to be tracking it down, we're going to be hounding them, so to speak, to ensure that they do follow up on the lead, because every component has to play its part. Everyone has to work together to make this entire program function the way it should. And the thing is, it's something that the police should be grateful for, because at the end of the day, the missing link in many of the investigations is the information that the public has. People on the streets, they know about most of the crimes. They know who did it, they know who ordered it, who, asked for this to be done, who has the drugs, who has the guns. The public knows. But if it is that the public calls Crime Stoppers and gives us that information, then the police have to ensure they do their part in the investigating so that the whole system works as it should.
Of course, community policing is a very important aspect of the effectiveness of Crime Stoppers. Can you give us the experience in your jurisdiction with how community policing works?
Well, in my jurisdiction, at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, I think police managers realized that policing no longer can be done by police alone. And I think that we could say that we were actually forced into it, because the cost of public policing started to escalate. And we had to go back to grassroots. How policing should really be done. Police and the public form partnerships. So we started forming partnerships in all areas, because the maintenance of public order, crime, resolving crime is not only a police issue, it's a whole communal issue. And with that premise, we started on community-based policing. The program that we're talking about here this morning, Crime Stoppers, is a perfect example. That would not work, or Crime Stoppers would not work, unless the three entities are involved. The media, the police, and the community at large. And it's the same thing with community policing. Community policing cannot work. And over the years, Paulo, jurisdictions, communities have abrogated their right, their civic responsibility to police their areas and leave it up to police. And then the community will complain that the police isn't doing this and the police isn't doing that, rightly so. But we have got back into the mode where the public takes the policing and forms the partnership with the police's specific area.
Because in this country, community policing is a relatively new concept. And I can imagine it's very difficult for the police to re-enter communities, given the kind of, the kind of stigma that is out there about police in the communities. That anybody in a uniform is the devil, and they don't want them in the communities.
That's interesting, Pablo, because on Tuesday we had a meeting with the Canadian High Commissioner, and at that meeting a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was there. And what he was explaining to us is that community policing is getting so big in Canada that they've gone back to even when they are training police officers. So part of your initial training now focuses on community policing, because they're trying to reinvent the whole concept of the way police look at the community and the way the community looks at the police. So they've recognized the importance of this sector, and they've gone back to basics with it.
Even a step further, Martin, it is being mandated. Community policing is being mandated in our Police Services Act. It's not something that we could pick and choose on. We have to do it. It's a must for us.
One of the problems, something that people complain about in this country is that, yes, there was a lot of enthusiasm at the inception of community policing, yet it seems to have dissipated. The presence in the community is not there anymore, and it seems as though the police have said, oh, okay, we've done our part, and now we have to go back to the station and wait for the people in the communities to give us a call if they have a problem.
No, you can't do it like that at all, because it's a philosophy, it's a way how you police, and no one part of the partnership can withdraw from it. Then that area will not be receiving any policing, and the police can't wait, neither can the community wait. And if it is viewed as a partnership, then that can't happen, or shouldn't happen.
But Mr. George, as an attorney, I can imagine that if community policing works effectively, the kind of ease that will be allowed in the judicial system. For example, if you have police who work in community regularly, you know that there's an offender. You know this offender because you are an officer who works in the community. You know the kind of activities that an individual might get up to every now and then. And you take it as your responsibility to try to get that individual to on the straight and narrow, as opposed to an officer who sees this person for the first time committing a crime and processes him. So he goes immediately to the court system, as opposed to getting a reprimand every now and then and counseling from a community police officer.
Well, it would certainly create a tremendous ease, Paolo, because as you may well be aware, the magistrates' courts in this country, which are the main processing facility for, low-level criminals, they are overburdened.
With fellas who've been held with a marijuana cigarette or something like that.
Exactly. And the thing is, most of these are repeat offenders. They're there week in, week out, they're there. So the thing is, it would create a tremendous ease up, because many times what you have is magistrates come in and they spend the entire morning simply adjourning their list, because all they can do is call the matters on the list, try to see who's there, who's not there, then you go on to the next matter. So the thing is, sometimes they never get a chance to even start hearing a matter or to start a trial, because you have a magistrate who may come and they have more than 100 cases on their list for the morning. How can you possibly ever begin to deal with something like that? So the thing is, we need to look at all these things and all the clogs in the system. And if community policing will help to ease that, then it's a tremendous benefit.
Okay, it frustrates the legal system and, of course, frustrates the criminals even more. And, well, you can imagine the result of that. Let's get those phone numbers out again so people who would like to...
Our Crime Stoppers numbers are 800-TIPS, 800-4011, 800-STOP. Easy numbers to remember, and the thing is, KSPT has really been good to us in terms of allowing us to get these easy numbers. 800-TIPS, 800-STOP, 800-4011. Your call is toll-free. You don't pay for the call. We don't want your name. We just want your info. That's a tagline we're using to get the message across that your identity is secured. And even our system that we use for the collection of the reward, it's also based on the code number. So when you call and you give us the information, we assign you a code number. When you call back to follow the progress of the information, all you do is you give your code number, and we know which investigation that deals with. If the investigation yields some measure of success and a reward is recommended, when you call for your reward, it's the code number that you use. So you just identify yourself by a code number, whether it's 007 or whatever code number that's assigned. When you go to collect the reward, you simply indicate which branch of Scotiabank you want to collect the reward at. We put arrangements in place, and you simply go there and you just give the code number. In fact, you don't even have to go yourself. You can send someone and just tell them, go to the tellers, just give them this number, tell them this number, and you will collect money. And that's the way it works. So the point is, people, even at that last stage where people may have the fear that, look, if I go to the bank, I would be identified. No, you don't have to go. You can send someone, just give them the code number, they just go, no question is asked. You don't have to produce any identification, nothing of the sort. Money is just handed to you, and you have done your part in helping to reduce crime.
And make sure that you know the person that you're sending very well, otherwise you'll end up calling Crime Stoppers about the friend that you sent to the money. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Listen, it's also important, folks, we just got the numbers, it's important that one of the problems that plagues Crime Stoppers are prank calls, so please ensure that you call with serious calls only. Do not call about Pompec puppies for sale. It's serious business. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there are the numbers, 800-STOP, 800-TIPS, 800-4011. It doesn't get easier than that. We will take a short break on the morning edition. We'll be right back.
Let's claim our country back. Support the Democratic Party.
Compared with other countries.
The pundits, the scribes, the economists all forecast an economic boom. Despite the political wrangling and turmoil of the day, we remain a blessed land, free from the terror and strife of civil and social unrest that is ripping apart societies such as Argentina and our neighboring Venezuela.
But our problem here is one of crime.
But while we count our good fortune, we cannot ignore the effect of the deadly cancer that is slowly eating away at our own society here in Trinidad and Tobago, the cancer of crime. It is all around us, with its pernicious, pervasive, and insidious effect. It is white-collar crime, it is blue-collar crime, it is crime in the streets, it is crime in the churches, it is crime in the homes. And as we heard recently, it is crime in the home for children by the very ones who are supposed to protect and take care of them. So it's not something we can escape. We all talk the talk and mouth the appropriate phrases and expressions of horror and disgust at the crime scene. But there is still a tremendous amount of hypocrisy involved. Hypocrisy in that we sometimes feel that once we barricade and insulate ourselves behind our electronic gates, our burglar-proofed fences, our burglar-proofed houses, and we relax in the comfort of our Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs, that we are